noted the world over for pioneering the modern sound of beat metal fusion. Emerging from Sacramento near San Francisco, they have managed in a few short years to not only produce a handful of stunning albums, but also becoming Grammy Award winners with a devoted worldwide fan base. Sacramento in the early 90s was heavily influenced by the fusion of hip-hop and metal emerging from bands such as Korn and Limp Bizkit. But one group not only matched what these musicians were doing, but exceeded it. That band was the Deftones. The singer of the Deftones, Chino Moreno, was born on the 20th of June 1973. The second of 5 children and the eldest of 3 brothers, it is said that the biggest influence in Chino's life was his mother, Debbie, who noticed and encouraged her son's musical talents from early on. Even though his mother taught at his school, something which would terrify most children, Chino didn't seem to mind and worked hard at his studies. Being a keen boarder, he was often seen skating around Sacramento or riding his BMX bike. Whilst we all know him today as Chino, back at school things were slightly different.
It's hard for me to call him Chino because as we were in high school and junior high, we always knew him as Camilo, and it was probably hanging out at the Cow Club that I found out that people were calling him Chino, and I had to keep saying, well, who's that? Who's Chino? And they finally said, that's Chino. Well, no, that's Camilo. What are you talking about? But I don't know where it came in. I just know that in one world he was Camilo, in the other world he was Chino, and the Chino world won over.
Chino started his musical journey playing drums. However, he soon realised that banging the skins was not for him and turned to singing, often screaming along with his favourite tracks on the radio. It wasn't long before his talents were noticed, and he became the lead singer of a new band called the Deftones. One person who remembers his first encounter with Chino was the band's first manager, David Park.
First time I met Chino, Stefan had called me and invited me to go see his new band, Deftones. This is after the demise of FMK, this other band that Stefan and I had worked for. And little theater called the Guild Theater, just outside of downtown Sacramento. But Chino was very, very shy on stage, very shy. And, you know, he looked down at the stage and, you know, sort of hid his face from the crowd. He had this big mop of hair and turned his back to the audience, you know.
Chino is kind of a complex guy. You see him on stage, and he tends to be wild, jumping off, you know, the stage into the crowd. You know, very much the energetic alpha male type frontman.
Stefan had told him that he'd invited me, but I don't think Chino knew what I looked like or whatever. So Chino comes off the stage, and I said, you know, hey, you know, good show, but you know, you really want to face the audience. I don't remember exactly what comment I made, but it was constructive criticism. And Chino's like, kind of, thanks, you know, whenever he walks away, and I guess he went over to Stefan, he's like, who the hell is that cock? And Stefan's like, that's Dave Park.
Off stage, he can tend to be kind of shy and very reserved. It almost tends to be kind of moody. I mean, I think that really shows in his music. You know, the music at Deftones careens through a lot of different kinds of emotions, and I think Chino really seems to kind of typify that.
Cunningham was in the same school year as Chino and was a keen drummer, a much sought-after member for any new band. He had been drumming from an early age, having received tuition from his musical stepfather. Abe's musical skills found him playing in a jazz combo and even marching up and down the football field in the school band. Clearly, a change of musical direction was on the cards, and it wasn't long before Abe found himself drumming for a new group with a fresh sound and contemporary attitude. One person who knows Abe Cunningham and the band more than most is his ex-housemate and long-term friend, Sherry Pope-Joy.
I first met Abe through him being in the Deftones, and soon after we moved in together to an apartment. We were all teenagers and partying all the time, of course, but he had to maintain. He was a manager in 3 bands and went to school as well. So a funny little story that I remember was when we first moved in, we were welcomed by several different people, but one in particular that I do remember, he came home on his scooter from work and was greeted by a man in some short shorts and welcomed him to the neighborhood. And at that time, the particular area we lived in was called Lavender Heights, and it's a huge gay community, and I think that kind of scared him a little bit. And that was probably within the first week or so that we lived there, and from that point on, that set the tone for the whole entire time that we lived there until we got evicted.
Abe Cunningham, I think he's my future ex-husband. So if you're out there, Abe, and you're listening, I'm here in Sacramento, California, waiting just for you. I will do anything. I'll buy your rent. Not pay it, but buy it.
Abe's pretty cool. Always a good talker, just loves to talk about anything and everything. He was in another band for a time back in Sacramento called Fallacy, which was actually the really big popular band before Deftones came out. And even back then, he was known as being this crazy, amazing drummer, really good player. And he almost talks sort of the way he plays. Is, real busy, and there's always like perpetual motion. Real cool guy, always just kind of cracking jokes and whatnot. Probably the motor mouth of the band.
Stephen Carpenter was born on the 3rd of August 1970. Having grown up in Sacramento, Stephen, later to be known as Steph, never really showed any real inclination towards music until a near-fatal car crash. This left him in a wheelchair for several months, and sadly now out of reach of his one true joy, skateboarding. To keep the boredom at bay, Steph decided to invest his insurance compensation money in a guitar and amp, a hobby he hoped he would become proficient at whilst recovering. Steph didn't just become proficient, he excelled. A keen follower of the group in those early days was Mike Martinez, and it wasn't long before he and Steph became close friends. In fact, Mike has a lot to thank Steph for.
Steph introduced me to my wife, Tina, and it was just an acquaintance that he had known. He met her and introduced her to me. Next thing I know, she's inviting me to Pearl Jam the next night or the next week or whatever. So we're going out to there. The next thing I know, invite her to a movie. We started dating for like maybe about a couple of months, and then we got married in August of '95. I asked Steph to be my best man, and him and Celeste, Chino's wife, was bridesmaid, and when we had our first daughter in November of the following year, in '96, I asked Steph to be my godfather, and he accepted, and I was very happy about that.
When I remember meeting Stephen, it was pretty much immediate as far as him being very comfortable with asking me, do this, do that, take me here, pick up my equipment, take it over there, take me to the store, hey, you got anything to eat? No announcement when he showed up, but that kind of set the tone for the next 10 years as far as how Stephen is. But everybody loved him for that, and we expected it, and it was great because you could just never tell Stephen no. And I think him being a little bit older kind of took advantage of all the younger girls that did have cars. Even though I didn't want to, I just did it because he was a part of the band, and I just didn't want to hear any of his nagging or whatnot.
While I was managing the band, we used to do, a lot of touring up and down the coast. We were all sleeping in the floor of this Motel 6 room out on tour one day, and I had a couple hours to kill, before we had to load in for sound check. I think we were in Santa Cruz. Anyhow, we were all bored. Stefan had hopped in the shower, and Chi, the bass player, said, "Hey Dave, I'll give you $1 if you hop in the shower with Stefan." And Dave says, "I got another $1. I'll add $1 to that." And Chino says, "All right, $3. $3 you hop in the shower with Stefan." So I took my shorts off, stood outside the door. The rest of the guys are all, around me. And they're like, 1, 2, 3, go! And I burst in the door, burst in the shower, and immediately stood behind Stefan, put my hands on his hips, and he went, So, a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun on the road.
Chi Cheng was another native of Sacramento and was born on the 15th of July 1970, the son of Chinese immigrants. Like Steph, he too was a keen skateboarder, but perhaps his main interest was his bass guitar, given to him by his eldest brother Robert. Chi's first inspiration was the British metal band Iron Maiden, who have remained an influence on the Deftones ever since.
When I've talked to Chi and run into him on the streets, I always end up just talking about books and writing. He's written books of poetry and such, and seems to be almost more into that than music at times. He's always says, "I'm not a very good bass player," but what it seems to be really in his heart is writing poetry, working on a novel. So when I've talked to him both casually and even in interviews, we end up just talking about, what books have you read and things like that.
Chi, the bass player, is probably one of my favorite people in the music business. He's a very spiritual guy, very much into Zen Buddhism, and but at the same time there's a primitive side to him, and he's very true to himself, very true to who he is as an animal.
Frank Delgado was a later addition to the band, joining sometime after the original four. He had made his name as a DJ for a local hip-hop band called Socialistic, but his skills as a DJ were soon recognised by the band. Within a few years, many new Sacramento bands would include DJs, but at the time this move seemed revolutionary.
Of course, Frank Delgado was a member of Socialistic, the band I was part of. In the mid to late 90s, we started playing all of the shows with the Deftones, doing a bunch of different things, and we all became friends. Played around town, we did a bunch of things together. And that was right before a lot of the rock bands started getting DJs in their band, started incorporating the hip-hop thing with the rock thing that was going on, which is a beautiful thing. Frank just, was interested in trying to add something different. He's a musician, so he just wanted to add something different, wanted to be part of something different. The Deftones wanted to do something different. Of course, they're the creators and the founders of that total sound that they do. He just worked his way into doing music with them, not actually being a member of the group initially. He was just another element, that they could use. Then I guess it progressed into him actually becoming a full-fledged member, where he was in the photo shoots and he signed a contract and he was on tour getting, equal billing and pay like everybody else.
The Deftones used to always come over and check out, Frank, and see what he was doing with us. And because I think they just always thought it was so neat, like the way he was able to manipulate the turntables and things like that. And it's a very necessary part of hip-hop, to have a DJ there. So, seeing him come every day and be dedicated like that, I think they admired him a lot, on that level.
The newly formed band would spend hours practicing in Steph's garage, perfecting their own songs. Their first shows were low-key affairs, allowing the boys time to gain confidence and perfect their performances. However, Chino didn't seem to have many problems in this area and seemed to adapt well to having a microphone in his hand. The Deftones' earlier songs were nowhere near as meaningful as their later efforts. Lyrics would often reflect on typical teenage themes, such as the song Dope, a tune about the joys of pot smoking. With time, the Deftones began to discover where each of their strengths lay. The result was a far more polished and professional sound. However, their only audiences to date were strictly family and close friends. Their next task was to try and introduce their new sound to the Sacramento music scene.
Sacramento didn't have much of a music scene until probably the late 80s. It was very hit or miss. Weren't always a lot of clubs supporting original live music. There were some bands that had broken out. A group called Tesla was a very, very popular hard rock band, came out of Sacramento in the 80s. There's a few other bands that had kind of more like one-hit wonder kind of groups, but it helped put Sacramento on the map. The Cattle Club was really a place that kind of brought everybody together and really inspired people to form bands, say, hey, here's a place we can play.
The Cattle Club was a dark and dingy night spot on the edge of town, which owed its reputation for staging new and unsigned acts.
When we started the Cattle Club, we were kind of firing blind as to what was really out there that we could tap. We knew there were some good bands, you know, just buddies of ours that we knew were good bands doing like alternative music or stuff that wasn't hair rock and whatnot. But within about a year, this new generation of bands came along, these younger bands that were in high school or just out of high school, bands like Fallacy and Far, and the Deftones were one of them. And the funny thing about the Deftones was we kind of knew those guys even before I even knew they were in a band, even before I even knew they had interest in a band.
The Cattle Club was really like our home turf. It's a just small, dingy, but amazingly vibrant nightclub. The center of the Sacramento music scene for many, many years.
There were old Cattle Club shows that was like the hardest. They were the hardest. Abe, the way that Abe plays, you can feel like the drum coming through your chest, like all the way in the back of the room, you know. And for a guy that's all into beats, that's all I need. You know, I need to hear beats.
Stefan was the roadie for another band in town called FMK, and Stefan was always kind of the I don't know, he was the character, the loudmouth of the bunch. He was the guy that constantly found a way of sneaking into the Cattle Club. That was his thing. It was always great to see Stefan at the club because you never saw him come through the door. You'd be in the club, you'd be standing at the door, and he'd be walking from the back of the club, and you're like, when did you get in here? How did you get in here? And he'd hop the fence, or he'd like bribe someone to let him in a back door or something, or he'd always do this thing where he'd come up and he'd leave his Walkman at the front door and go, I got to go in and find a friend of mine. And then you wouldn't see him again for like 2 hours. And I swear to God, that is all Stefan ever did. I don't think he ever paid for a show. It was just kind of a joke eventually. It was just a joke. We just knew Stefan was never going to pay. He prided himself on the fact that he never paid. We'd always say, yeah, we'll put it on your tab. We'll put it on your tab. You better hope we never cash that tab of yours.
You know, this room that I think the fire code was, 279 people. We would regularly put, 600, 650 people, it packed into the room, like sardines with, a line of people waiting at the door.
The Deftones would soon find themselves headlining the Cattle Club on a regular basis and drawing a huge crowd. Brian McKenna was, and still is, one of the band's promoters, and still remembers these old Cattle Club days.
Initially, we'd have them open for different touring bands just at the Cattle Club, because that was the club I was booking at the time. They would play other venues. They would play at, say, the Guild Theater was one of the first places they played as a band. We kind of just build them up, and they started, after opening for different touring acts, they started winning over those bands' audiences as well.
A lot of famous acts played there. Smashing Pumpkins, Chili Peppers, Nirvana, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. In any event, was really where the band cut their teeth.
I always had a different respect for their group because of the way that their music sounded. It just got across to me, got across to a kid who's listening to only hip hop. I only want to listen to Nas, or I only want to listen to Boot Camp, or Snoop Dogg, or whatever's going on. I don't want to hear a lot of weak shit, and they played hard, so I liked them, and I always respected them.
Around 93, we were starting to move bands into the Crest Theater. We had taken certain local bands and made them so big through the Cattle Club just by spacing their shows out and hooking them up with other larger bands, that we were starting to fill the club with these bands, and we wanted to try them in a bigger room. And the Crest Theater was a room that held 1,000 people. And the big band of the moment, just a little ahead of the Deftones, was a band called Kai Coleman. They were putting out a CD, and at that time, putting out a CD was a really big deal. Everybody put out tapes, nobody put out CDs. This was the early 90s. I mean, you put out a CD, it's like, wow. That's like, you know, real professional. You're a real band. So we were to take the CD release show into the Crest Theater, and we really wanted to just load it up. And the band you could load it up with at that time was the Deftones. I mean, where Kai Coleman was the biggest thing, Deftones were right behind him. So we took these two bands into the Crest Theater, and it was basically the first time any two unsigned local acts had ever sold out the Crest Theater.
Sacramento's music scene has grown a lot since the early 90s, and the Deftones were definitely a big part of that. They were a band that helped show other young bands around town that you can make it out of Sacramento. You don't need to move to LA, you don't need to go to San Francisco to try and get a following, to gain attention of the major labels. You might have to tour a lot, which is what the Deftones did, but they were a group that really did show people it was possible to do that here in Sacramento.
With the band gaining a reputation in the Sacramento area, they continue to work on Deftones material, frequently committing versions to tape and selling the finished mini-albums at their concerts. Locke, from the band Socialistic, remembers those early days hanging out with the boys from the band.
They rehearsed in this little tiny room, you know, paying like $15 for 3 hours. We practiced in the large room, paying like $20 for 3 hours. We used to run across the hall and tease each other and make noise, and they'd practice, and we'd go in there and check them out. We'd practice, and they'd come and check us out and hang out. We just did a lot of drinking together. We had a lot of fun drinking. Barbecues, birthday parties in the park, we show up. I show up my kids, you know, bring all the kids around. We all hang out just like friends, you know, just being really cool people with each other, you know.
Chi and Chino and Abe, their musical influences come from so many different directions. I don't know if a lot of other bands have the kind of depth, musical depth, that those guys have. And again, it comes from growing up in Sacramento where you're really not turned on to anything. So you kind of just stumble into everything by accident, and there is no like one thing being shoved down your throat. You're just kind of whatever your buddy turned you on to this week or whatever you happened across that week. And I think that's what you see a lot of that going on with like a lot of people that grew up in Sacramento in the early 90s. And that's why I think they're such an original band.
By now, the Deftones were huge in Sacramento and began playing shows outside the area, gaining new and bigger audiences all the time. It was at this time that they came into contact with Korn, a band whose musical sound drew surprising similarities. Heralding from the equally isolated Californian town of Bakersfield, Korn had also perfected an aggressive riff-based style of metal music.
Deftones and Korn came up at about the same time. You know, I'm sure their timelines have a little differences in them, but they came out at around the same time and from different parts of the state. Sacramento is, you know, inland, so it's not the like cultural mecca that San Francisco or Los Angeles is. It's more ag-related, lots of agribusiness. It's a cow town, and so people didn't expect the next hot music act to come out of there. Likewise, for Korn to come out of the same kind of environment, an agribusiness-based environment that's not known for its culture, at the same time, really says a lot for the, you know, California's valley culture.
It wasn't long before the two bands were playing gigs together, with the Deftones often having the opening slot. Drinking together after the show, Chino and Jonathan Davis from Korn realised they had a lot in common and soon became firm friends. As the Deftones were about to find out, this friendship was to prove invaluable.
Their relationship kind of helped feed off of each other, kind of helped, you know, set both of them up where they could be apart now. Korn has gone one way with their music. It become a definite entity in their own right, and so has the Deftones. I think that they kind of came up together. They played a lot of shows back and forth, you know, Southern California, North Cal, just going back and forth. And that probably helped build a great relationship with them, you know. It probably helped inspire each other musically. And I don't think that they were trying to take anything away from each other or trying to use each other for, you know, any purpose. I just think that they were two bands, and are two bands who happen to be in the same genre of music, who happen to like some of the same things, and who happen to use some of the same styling, just a little bit. But I know that they work well together. I opened a show for them. You know, my band opened a show with them, and I know that they work tremendously well together.
1994 would turn out to be the band's best year so far, having previously spent so much time travelling around in a tiny van from gig to gig with very little money. The turning point for the Deftones came in July '94, whilst playing at a small Los Angeles club called the Coconut Teaser. It was here that they fell under the radar of Guy Azari. Not just another member of the audience, Guy was the co-chairman of a growing label by the name of Maverick Records. This label was later to sign the Deftones and turn them into a world-class act.
Obviously, as busy as we were touring up and down the coast, we'd put out some demos, for sale, and every demo was a little better than the last one. The songs were getting progressively better. And I had a number of relationships with different record companies, and we got offered a deal with Metal Blade, and they sort of courted the band, and there were a number of other labels that were literally on the verge of placing offers to the band.
The guy's been around and doing this since probably like '89. They went down south, and like I said, a lot of their time was spent like traveling. And they met up with other bands, and I remember the first time they came up from the LA area, it was like early '95, and they had seen this band called Korn. And, they came up and they played me a demo tape, and it was really great. I mean, I hadn't heard anything like that. There was,
I believe, 3 or 4 labels that were looking at them at the time. These boys were just out there. It was just this whole new attitude of finally we've got this, now we have to get this attention that we know we've been deserving for years and years, but at the same time, we were all barely legal.
Through some mutual friends in LA, we had come onto the radar screen of Guy Oseary at Maverick. And at the time, Maverick was absolutely bar none the hottest label in the business. It was Madonna's label, height of her career, and they made an offer to sign the band. And we had gone in and done a private showcase for Guy Oseary and Freddie the Man, who's the president of the label, at a little rehearsal space in LA. 3 songs in, Freddie's sitting behind me. Freddie taps me on the shoulder and says, "That's it, I've seen enough." He says, "This guy can't control himself." He motions over at Guy, like Guy's just crawling out of his seats. He can't control himself. He's like, "I gotta have this. I have to have this. You have to sign with us." So, Guy really won the guys over, and we did the deal at Maverick.
But these guys had only been together like 13 months before they got signed up, and I'm happy for it. I mean, they were great. But, and I was wondering, why did it take so long for them to do it? I mean, why didn't anybody notice it?
2 people in the whole group were married, and 2 people had kids. And so at the same time, it was, oh my God, I have a family and I'm getting married, to, oh my God, I'm a rock star, and having to balance the both of those, and seeing the balance then and seeing the balance now. It's exactly flip-flop, but at the same time, it was meant to happen then, and I'm kind of glad it's been a happy medium as far as not rising so far to the top and then having to crash to the bottom.
Deftones are fucking sick. I love the new album. I didn't care too much for White Pony, but this one was sick as.
But the Deftones, no, they're great. They're awesome.
Yeah, they sound badass live.
It was late in 1994 that the band entered the recording studio to start work on their debut album, Adrenaline. A launch date had been planned for July '95, which allowed the band plenty of time to promote the album. Now all they needed was a record producer.
Well, one of my friends, one of the relationships that I had made down in LA was a lady named Lisa Marie with a company called Moyer Marie. They manage most of the top producers and engineers in the business. And Guy had mentioned Terry Date's name as a prospective producer for the band. You know, the guys in the band were just like, oh my God, that would be amazing. You know, Terry's coming off of some very big records. I talked to Lisa, and you know, Lisa proposed it to Terry, and Terry was very enthusiastic about doing it, and we made the deal, and the rest is history.
With Terry at the helm, work could now begin on the album. Many of the songs had already been practiced to perfection at the Cattle Club. However, they did set out to write a number of new songs in order to showcase Frank Delgado, the DJ formerly from Socialistic.
Adrenaline, outside of Sacramento, I don't think made a lot of noise at the beginning. You know, outside of California, there weren't a lot of people that probably knew about the Deftones. So it did take them a lot of touring to establish their fan base.
Well, Adrenaline was pretty well received by the press and the fans. I think it was fairly evident, even from the debut album, that there was more to this band than, you know, your typical hard rock or heavy metal act.
Adrenaline, you know, to me was a very good debut album. They had a few of those tracks out as a small EP, you know, locally, and the things that they, you know, sold on tour in cassette form before it actually was recorded. So a few of the songs, Engine Number 9, you know, made it to that album.
And radio certainly wasn't playing them. MTV wasn't playing them. It was a lot harder than a lot of the music that was happening at the time, a little bit more edgy, perhaps. But around here, people were digging it.
Everyone in public, basically, they were the biggest thing at that time and got tons of press and promotion from the public. But as far as with the media and whatnot, it wasn't really ready to be accepted. But I think in whole, the Adrenaline album is fantastic.
Real songs, real hooks. The band had teeth, you know. They were aggressive, but there was some meat and potatoes to them. There was something meaningful, you know, to what they were saying.
It was a really good album. It was really, it showed what the Deftones were about and are about. You know, I think it punched a hole, you know, in that whole genre of rock meets rap without actually saying it, you know. Chino, a long time ago, before he was singing, he was rapping. He rapped for a long time.
Chino writes in a very sort of stream of consciousness kind of way, lyrically, but the things that he touches on lyrically are things that, you know, things that'll make you stop and think. I mean, he's not, you know, he doesn't write about your typical, you know, boy meets girl, you know, or you know, teen strife kind of things. I mean, he has a head on his shoulders, you know.
Just becoming signed and being eager and being legal and being able to go out and drink with an ID and not having to sit beers on the side and whatnot. It was becoming more real for the boys.
They had put into that album what they had been doing for a number of years, from the time we played at the Cattle Club with them, from their small tours down in Southern California. It was a good culmination of what they had learned, their experiences, and their talent. They held on to who they were. They didn't change anything about themselves. Other than the sound, the way the recording was, to me, it was a true Deftones sound, true Deftones record.
Still the way they wanted it portrayed, with a little bit of nips and tucks in the lyrics so that the label didn't actually know what they were saying. And I think it was tampering with how close can we get to the line without pissing off the label.
Over since yesterday. Gather your thoughts, this shall be a test.
After a hectic touring schedule, often being the opening act for their good friends Korn, and also going on tour with the all-girl grunge hell-raising nightmare that is L7, the Deftones returned to the recording studio to start work on their next album. A lot more time and effort was placed into the recording of Around the Fur, and like its predecessor, Terry Date found himself being talked into producing it.
Around the Fur as a sophomore release is better than traditional sophomore releases. There's, the infamous rock and roll sophomore slump that a lot of bands fall into. I don't think Around the Fur had that problem.
Chino's breakout moment in terms of being a vocalist, where he showed that he really could sing. On the main singles from the record, it's almost like a crooning kind of sound that he has with his vocals that explodes and, shrieking and all that. So there really was this yin-yang kind of energy.
Definitely their breakthrough record as far as the mainstream goes, I think. They picked up a lot more of the MTV radio crowd as fans and as, business people as well with Around the Fur. And a lot of that, I think, was due to the fact that Adrenaline was an undeniable hit.
I remember one of the songs was definitely getting played on the radio here more, My Own Summer, and you would hear that around the country a bit more. But again, there wasn't a lot of radio play and MTV support for them then, but was for them musically was definitely branched out from the sound of Adrenaline. It still had all the in-your-face power punch kind of energy, but also had more moods to it. Definitely tried to stretch their sound a little bit, and it worked.
Chino, as a vocalist, I feel has come a long way over the past 13 years, and you can tell in each of the albums that it's kind of carefree and nonchalant, and now it's more thought of and more intense, and you can feel the emotion coming from the inside as opposed to just vocally screaming and hollering about what's going on in the song. There's actual feeling, and I think that that's what his secret is as a vocalist.
Well, Around the Fur, I think, is a record that shows, a lot of development. Adrenaline, as great a record as it is, was relatively straightforward, even though the band had started to, sort of spread their wings artistically. They hadn't really defined their sound as much, and I think with Around the Fur, you start to see them. There's a little something grander,
more personal. Chino wrote, from what I believe, were songs that were from home. Things that he was going through, things that he felt. Mascara was my favorite song on that entire album. I loved it. I just think that it was they had a better understanding of the business. They were secure in being able to do the music that they liked doing, getting guidance from Terry Date, who produced their albums, kind of thing, opened the door for them to be who they are. And if you didn't like the Deftones, fuck it, they were going to be who they wanted to be.
Around the Fur, there was a lot of Stephen. I felt a lot of Stephen's influence coming through in that, and I think that as a band, that's important, that one person always isn't in the spotlight or taking over the whole track or the whole album for that matter, and I think that it's been a power struggle for the boys to decide who gets to do what on which album, but I think Stephen came out the most on Around the Fur.
By the end of 1997, Around the Fur had sold an astounding 400,000 copies, twice as much as Adrenaline. Having done well with the album on both sides of the Atlantic, the Deftones finally had their first hit single, My Own Summer. It was now necessary for the boys to embark on their World Annihilation tour. Although a huge success, there were some unfortunate incidences on the European leg of the tour. After a show in Germany, the band had discovered thieves had broken into their tour bus and stripped it.
When Frank first started, he was using a lot of like ambient sounds and different noises and things. He had this old crappy Gemini mixer and just had all this static and stuff in it. When that thing wore out, Frank was looking in books and he was like, I don't want to get another crappy mixer. He was like, I want this. And he opened the book to the Vestax, and it was like this $700 mixer. Let's see if we can work it out. So we did, and I put down money to help him get his mixer. And that was the first mixer that got stolen with all of their equipment when they went on tour.
The band had also decided they would no longer be the support act for other groups. From now on, they would be the headliners.
Typically, I know the Deftones have turned down tours that were just really over-commercialized, trying to take advantage of like a certain time, genre of music. They did take Ozfest when they were able to go out because they were able to play with Black Sabbath. And I think that's somewhat ironic or somewhat actually telling in that, Black Sabbath didn't sell as many records as Led Zeppelin, or get as much airplay, but they're every bit as influential or more, And just as Deftones may not have sold as many records as Korn or Limp Bizkit, but they're every bit, if not more, influential.
Despite the touring, Chino still found time to work on his own project. Aided by 2 guitarists and a DJ, his new project, Team Sleep, had little in common with the Deftones sound.
I think that Chino went solo. I think they all took on side projects. And that's just a part of being an individual. When you get an opportunity to be totally yourself, you do it, I don't think it's because he hates any of the Deftones stuff or he wish he was doing something else. I think that it's just getting to see Chino, You get to see DJ Crook. You get to see Todd. You get to see these guys who have another common bond in music. That's totally sounding different.
After the tour to promote Around the Fur, the Deftones returned to start work on their third album. White Pony was finally released on the 20th of June 2000. The album's radical departure in sound provoked immediate controversy, with fans either loving it or hating it. The sales figures, however, showed that those who loved it were most definitely in the majority.
In interviewing the guys around White Pony, there really was a sense of wanting to do something different, to not be like this sort of sound that became cookie cutter in a way, of this really hard kind of rap metal sound, and to show that, we're better than this and to really do something different. And they succeeded with that, I think. It was their best-selling record today. They won a Grammy for one of the songs, Elite, and really established themselves as being a trailblazing hard rock band that could be heavy, but also put in all these different kinds of moods and elements to it, even very slow trip-hop kind of songs, to things that are just completely in your face, to songs that kind of brought all of that together.
The White Pony album was all about that single, the Change single, and that was a big thing for them because they had, before, they were never surrendered to doing a single type of song. I knew all of them and how they felt about doing anything that conformed to the music industry's needs, and Change was Basically, it was a way for them to do what they wanted to do and not really conform with the industry, but still have what the industry needed.
It really seemed to have worked. I mean, obviously, it was their biggest selling record so far, and took them into directions that people might not have expected.
We ended up being able to do some of the things that I wasn't even sure that any of us from Sacramento could do. Winning a Grammy, I mean, getting nominated is one thing, but winning a Grammy, something entirely different right there.
I think this is the first chance, as them being a band and being successful and being familiar with touring, that they actually got a chance to be in the mainstream media. Whether or not they wanted to be there, I'm not really sure. But having MTV recognize that the Deftones are having an album when they already had two previous kind of shocked everyone here.
They didn't want to become somebody else or sound like anybody else. They wanted to stay themselves. By the time White Pony came out, there's people all over the place sounding like them. You know, we had local bands to national groups sounding like the Deftones. In my opinion, that's just my opinion. I mean, things that other people whose videos I saw, who videos happen to get more airplay on MTV, for instance, to me were bands who were emulating the Deftones.
MTV being so flashy, they take one person, promote it, and then boom, they're gone. And I don't think that the boys are interested in any of that at all. They want to play and be a band and do what they do.
I mean, so the Deftones were definitely setting a new sound, a new style, a new movement towards making good music, not just rock music, not just, you know, trying to blend types of music, but just where everybody's background comes into focus and blends in together. That great chemistry. They once again stayed the Deftones.
They really have developed as songwriters really well, you know, and I wonder if it's, you know, Stefan's adherence to metal, like, I mean, he's a metalhead, you know, and Chino's more interested in softer, more emotional music. So I think that maybe together they really do have an interesting chemistry.
The Deftones have managed to keep a loyal and passionate fan base due to their honest, no-bullshit approach to dealing with them. This maturity has also come through in their music videos.
Their videos have stayed consistently the way that they are, true to the heart, how they want to be portrayed at that specific time, and they're not really worried about all the lights and the flash and the promotion and all that. If that pattern continues on, they'll outlast everyone, and they'll just be more kids getting equipment from their parents and becoming rock stars, and here's going to be the Deftones at 50 and 60 and 70, hopefully, still successful, making the same videos with their underpants hanging out and spiky belts and frosted hair.
Having stayed true to their home fan base, the Deftones were soon to be rewarded for their achievements and contributions.
The band had arranged to play a show just around the corner here, a big auditorium called Memorial Auditorium, very famous hall. You know, Jimi Hendrix played there, the Beach Boys, Rolling Stones. The city had spent a great deal of money renovating the building, and there was a big deal locally around, you know, Deftones playing Memorial Auditorium. It was a very big event, and Heather Fargo, who's the mayor of Sacramento, gave Chino the key to the city, or Deftones the key to the city, and made it a official Deftones Day in Sacramento.
I can't tell you what we're doing, but we're riding around his car one day, and he said he ain't gonna get stopped by the cops. He's like, "Fool, I got the key to the city."
I was standing right there when she let go. I was begging you, please, but you still said no. I was washing my hair.
After White Pony, many people were expecting the band to immediately start work on their next album. But the Deftones are not in the habit of being rushed.
I don't know what it is about Deftones that is those multi-year-long gaps between records, but quite frankly, the records are all really good. So people stop complaining once they get it.
them taking their time, which has pretty much always been their model in everything in life, not just the band, but I'll get there when I get there attitude, has to be respected.
You know, to those guys' credit, they do other things. You know, Stefan has a metal band, G does poetry, Chino does Team Sleep, Abe has his other band. So, you know, I mean, they all have lives.
They got a Grammy, and a Grammy doesn't mean really a whole lot unless you're making good music.
And I also think it says a lot about them that they don't feel the need to just be shitting out records every 9 months. You know, nobody does that well.
Do we want to do this now? Do we want to take our time? Do we want to lose money and take our time and do something good that we like? Or do we want to rush it and get paid? And I don't think these boys are in it to just get paid and make all of these friends. They're in it because they love this music and they love what they do. And if you have to wait 5 years for it, then you wait 5 years for it.
When you get an award for something that you love doing, you put your time in on working on it, not because you want to be, you know, well received, but because you believe in what you're doing, then that's what matters.
On the 20th of March 2003, the long-awaited fourth album, simply self-titled Deftones, finally hit the shelves. The album rapidly became a runaway success, with fans eager to hear where the fluctuating Deftones sound would lead them next, as it had done numerous times before.
The newest Deftones album is probably, in my opinion, the most interesting one. They've all, I mean, talk about, you know, going through a bunch of crap throughout your career and your life. Well, I mean, this is the latest one, you know, and I can't say with any certainty what those guys have gone through personally or band-wise, but they're still together.
With their self-titled Deftones album, the group really wanted to break away even more that, okay, we even did this cooler stuff than we've ever done on White Pony, but let's still try and even challenge ourselves more, and that seems to be a recurring theme with the band. So there are these pronounced elements of the music being very mellow, almost dreamy-like, but then also at times being super, super heavy.
It's fantastic. Having it before it actually came out was fantastic, and not being able to share it with anyone was kind of hard, but at the same time being so excited that when it came out and they had a home show the day that their album came out, I think that was perfect. I don't know if it was planned or coincidence or whatnot.
Probably just the next logical step in their journey. It's clean, it's tight, really strong. They seem to have been able to sharpen their skills as songwriters, which is something they've been working on the whole time, but they also seem to have been able to get comfortable again with that rage, that, like, you know, that cathartic release.
The elevation of the fans here in Sacramento and having a packed house in your hometown, and then you get to say, and by the way, go buy my album that came out today, or being able to sign your album that came out today. I think that the fans have learned to appreciate this.
In a way, with just the album being self-titled, I think it really shows that, you know, this is who we are, a band that can challenge ourselves. You know, we can be heavy, but we can also be dreamy and quiet, and, you know, we can have the heavy, you know, kinds of Slayer influences, but also maybe a group like My Bloody Valentine can also fit into that.
Chino and his hidden ways of saying things and being metaphorical and whatnot, this time around you can't really tell if it's for real or if it's about a specific person, or if he was fighting with Chi that day or fighting with Stefan that day or trying to record that day and two of the kids weren't there, or someone brought their kids too. It's just all this chaos going on, and I think that it's kind of a reflection of their lives right now.
The Deftones have become one of the greatest acts to emerge from California in recent years. Their steadfast devotion to their Sacramento roots has enabled them to maintain a level head towards their lives, their fans and their music. Surely a recipe, if ever there was one, for lasting stability and success.
Fame, as far as Abe, Chino, and Chi are concerned, hasn't changed them a bit.
These guys are a bit more grounded, I think, because of where they've come from. You know, they, by and large, were raised in South Sac, which is, you know, not the best neighborhood.
Steph was like made for stardom. I mean, basically when they got signed, that was like a signed steel stamp on Steffen's ass as far as like, I'm a certified rock star. I mean, that was basically him saying, you know.
As much, if not more than most artists, they appreciate, you know, what they have. They appreciate the success they have.
I know that they're all getting a little fatter, but besides that, you know, I think they're all pretty much the same guys.
You know, if you meet the guys on the street, just cold, you know, you'd never pick them out of a crowd.
Deciding who your friends are and who your friends aren't, and accepting the ones that aren't, and getting used to that is one of the hardest things that I think I've seen Chino go through.
Everybody has just a lot more of a responsible attitude now, you know, as far as like what they know that they need to do, versus before it was more or less just like, you know, breaking musical boundaries or doing things that they felt were needed in music. Now it's like they're doing things they feel are needed in their lives.
I think right now family is very important to him, and I think trying to figure out his place in the family and having a family and learning how to be a father and a husband when you're never around over 10 years, you know, you're home once a month. I think that since they've been home over this last year before this new album came out, that he's had a lot of time to find his place.
They have proved themselves as ever-changing pioneers in a new genre of music. Where they lead, many are sure to follow.
Steffen's in love with rock and roll. Steffen's in love with being a rock guy. He will find any way, I think, to just be big on stage. I think all the guys are into that, really, but Steffen's just, he's just the funniest to me. I love him. He's just, I don't know, he just makes me laugh. He's just so into that.
I think as the band continues to grow artistically and commercially, I have a suspicion that they're going to be a lot more famous than they are now. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot more, you're going to see a lot more of a radio presence.
I think that Chino is going to have a lot of irons in the fire. I just see him as somebody who is going to, if for some reason the Deftones ever broke up or anything like that, he seems like the guy that would be just collaborating with everyone under the sun. Even if the Deftones never broke up, he seems like the kind of artist who is going to, again, part of that whole challenging side of his creativity. He seems like someone who's very prone to working with a lot of different people.
I mean, instead of going out and taking every big tour that's been offered them or every opportunity to exploit their what they do, they've really held back. They've really been very choosy as what they do.
I wouldn't be surprised if the guy released an acoustic album of him singing songs with just him and a guitar. I mean, he's got a great voice. He's a great songwriter.
More growth, good music. One of them bands that, you know, 20 years from now, and they got like 25 albums, you know, people are still gonna be buying them.
You know, there were days way back when we did shows and, you know, we'd get the bands to play acoustic, be it Far, Deftones, or whatever. They would be remarkable performances, and I haven't seen them do anything like that in years.
Having taken the time to establish themselves in their home lives as well as their music, they are now having the worldwide success that they surely deserve.
The future for the Deftones, in my eyes, hopefully is endless. And I know with the boys, they are not planning on disbanding anytime soon, or at all for that matter.
People are going to look back at the first 2, 3 albums and go, classics. The way to do it. Started a movement, started a new sound.
I think one of them said in an interview that there's going to have to be a death in order for the Deftones to stop.
As long as they stay the way they are, and they work the way they are, the chemistry is the same, I don't see the Deftones going anywhere until they decide that they don't want to be the Deftones anymore.
I know